Southern Republican Leadership Conference begins Thursday. It runs through Saturday. Lots of potential presidential candidates will be in town in Oklahoma City, downtown Oklahoma City, across the street from the Cost Convention Center. This guy I usually talk with via Skype or via phone. It's our Washington, D.C. Bureau Chief, Chris Casteel. Thanks for joining us today on the set.
It's great to be here, Dave. I love this place. It's so nice.
Well, it's cool just being down here in the vibe, watching people walk their dogs and all that.
We could go do man in the street interviews. It'd be so easy. Sir.
Excuse me, let me step out the door. Could you step inside for a second? Chris, I want to start this conversation before we set up the conference with, you're in D.C. What's your interaction with some of the political candidates? You see them in a different setting.
Generally, the only ones I generally see are the members of the Senate, the ones that are Ted Cruz, Texas, Lindsey Graham, South Carolina, and Marco Rubio of Florida. I'm probably forgetting somebody, but those are the only ones I see generally. And my exposure to some of the others, well, Santorum, Senator Santorum, I've been seeing him since he was a House member in the early 90s. But mainly I just see them on policy stuff. I see them at press conferences. I see them on the Senate floor. Some of these other ones, I basically have just been watching on C-SPAN in the last couple of weeks at some of these. I'd never heard Ben Carson speak until I watched some C-SPAN clips of him in South Carolina. Same with Carly Fiorina. And I think they're interesting. I think they'll be good. I've never, the one who, Mark Everson, the IRS commissioner, what an interesting position to try to a former job title to have to run for president. IRS commissioner, knowing how popular that agency is with people. But so I've never heard him speak. I'm interested in hearing some of these people live that I've never.
Well, and you go straight to my second question. From the Hill to Oklahoma City, what are your expectations this week?
Yeah, I don't expect. I think Tom, you and I were talking about Congressman Tom Cole. I was talking to him about this. He had a quote about this, at this point in the process, this is almost like, comparable to spring training. And I think they're all still kind of, making mistakes, kind of finding their stump speeches. I don't think you're going to hear anything earth-shattering. There may be some emphasis on energy, but not a lot of differences among them on energy, I wouldn't think at all. It's not like they're going to come in here and try to take on the fossil fuel industry or something. It'll be all about, crude exports and everything. But you'll get a sense, I think we'll at least get a sense of how the people in the room respond to them. There were some stories last week. They were all in Iowa last week, and there were some stories about, all the buzz about Carly Fiorina. Apparently she really, there's a lot of buzz about her and that, and I think, about Senator Rubio. So it'll just be interesting to be in the room and see how people respond to him there.
It's the Oklahoma's D.C. Bureau Chief, Chris Casteel. You have a story in today's paper about a poll that was conducted looking at how people view the Republican Party. What is the state of the Republican Party these days?
Well, so this poll, Pew Research poll, and it wasn't a like a horse race poll. It did not ask if the election were to, that common question, if the election were today, who would you vote for? It's like, give us your impression of him. You favor him? You have a favorable impression of him? Not. And they did 6 Republican candidates. Don't ask me to name all 6, but the bigger named ones, Fiorina wasn't among them, Carson wasn't. I think it was Rand Paul, Huckabee, the senators, and Jeb Bush. And most of them were over 50, I think, 50% favorability. But I think one of the points that they made in this survey was that at this point in the cycle, in the presidential cycle, to 2015 with the election a year away, Republicans have a more favorable impression of their field than at comparable points in the last 2 presidential election cycles. That sounded complicated. I think it wasn't really a huge difference. It's just like, at this point, Republicans feel good about the candidates that are out there, I think.
Who's the front runner at this point?
There is not a front runner.
You mentioned the horse race in the poll, but that's what the common person wants to see is who's the front, who's the lead candidate? Is it Jeb Bush? Does he have the most buzz right now?
I just don't know. And that changed a lot. That seemed to change weekly. Remember back in 2011, 2012, I mean, it'd be Herman Cain one week, and Newt Gingrich the next week. And I think the same thing is going to happen here. The same thing will happen. And not only have their ups, they'll have their downs. You know, Governor Bush last week, and then Senator Rubio, I think to some extent, fumbling the Iraq question. You know, having a hard time answering a reverse hypothetical, you know, a backward hypothetical. So I think everybody will have their down weeks. They'll stumble on something. You know, something will come up unexpectedly, and they won't respond to it well, and then the debates will start.
Isn't that how the news cycle always goes? You never know when an event will happen, and there's a reaction to that, or someone is indirectly involved.
Right. That's what we like about the business, I assume.
It is what we like about the business.
But, you know, and I think, you know, I personally could not do, you know, presidential campaign. I couldn't cover that, you know, night and day like some people do, and I just kind of wonder how, you know, how they do it. And I got to assume it's just because they know something kooky is going to happen, you know, and they just kind of live for that buzz of the, you know, that story of the day thing that's eventually going to come, because really, how else could you?
Let me ask you about this story of the day, the Iraq situation. Are you a little surprised that the candidates, both Republican and the Democrat side, didn't have a response a little more buttoned down on that? Or was there a response to have buttoned down?
What is your response? I mean, but I guess I am. I mean, but again, I think as you mentioned, Hillary's in the exact same position as you.
She was catching some fire.
There's no daylight between her and but there is daylight because Jeb Bush didn't vote on it, and she actually did. You know, so I just need to be careful. You know, I think it's an interesting thing that this has happened. But I think you know, really going forward isn't the question now, what is your doctrine? What is your policy? You know, where's your red line? Are you gonna commit? Are you gonna talk Congress into going along with another, you know, ground war because a country has chemical weapons? Is the answer to that yes or no or maybe? You know, I don't know. So obviously that wasn't enough in Syria, right? And because we had the President Obama red line and all the Republican congressmen because of, you know, Obama, I guess. Well, no, we're not doing that. Well, but that was the whole basis of going into Iraq. So is there going to be some kind of consistent doctrine that these guys can see? How many ground troops do they want in Iraq now to fight, and Syria to fight ISIS? Be specific. They should be specific about this. You know, this is, if they want to make foreign policy, you know, really dominant, and should be a dominant issue in this campaign, then, you know, it's on them to spell it out.
I mentioned the conference is over at the Cox Convention Center. It runs through Saturday, and on Saturday there will be a straw poll. What's the significance of that, and what perhaps could be the importance of that for candidates?
Yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting. I mean, it has no, in my opinion, this early on, no lasting effect.
Another turn of the crank of the news cycle.
Exactly. You know, the big straw poll is the Iowa one. That, you know, that tradition goes back decades, and that is one where candidates literally put in hundreds of thousands of dollars and organizational time and effort, you know, to get people to vote for them. It's a huge deal, but I mean, I don't know who won it last time. Maybe, you know, I'm sure there's some people in Washington that can tell you who won it last time, you know. So what was the meaning of the Iowa straw poll last time? What's the meaning of the Oklahoma City straw poll this time? It's a snapshot of, you know,
or perhaps
where this race is very early on.
Or perhaps it's where the funding is at that point. Do they keep going or say, nope?
Well, that would be true if it were, you know, a real poll or you know, a scientific poll. I mean, Bill Shapard, who's doing Sooner Poll, says this is a scientific poll because it's, you know, this control group. But again, you don't know. There's at least some fraction of this audience that will be here because their, you know, registration fees were probably paid by a candidate to vote in the straw poll. So I'm not sure that makes it scientific. Maybe I don't know how to define that in terms of a poll, but I'm not answering your question. I mean, that's not up to me to decide how scientific it is or how significant it is, I guess. I plan to write a story about who wins it.
It happens on Saturday. His story will come out Sunday in the Oklahoman, and of course before that on newsok.com. Chris will be among our reporters covering the conference. Again, it starts Thursday, runs through Saturday. Chris, I look forward to working with you in person this week as we cover this event. It should be a lot of fun.
It should be. We'll be busy.
We will be busy. And again, the live stream from the main ballroom, you can find that each day on newsok.com.